Hey friends, this is Melanie from Softening Hearts Therapy, and in this video I want to tell you about how I became a feminist, why and how I stopped being a feminist and became a traditional housewife, and just honestly shed some light on the lies of feminism and just share what feminism actually did to my heart and to my relationship, and then ultimately how Jesus healed everything. So stay tuned. So I want to give some context about how I actually ended up becoming a feminist, and I feel like it starts really in childhood. So in my early years, like very young, elementary school age, I was an overachiever. I played a lot of sports. I was really good in school, and I got a lot of attention and praise and like applause from everyone, it seemed, from family, from school, from peers, for how good I was in sports and just like my athleticism and my strength and how book smart I was. And over time, it was like more masculine qualities were being more and more reinforced and just praised. And I actually remember even being encouraged to be tough and be one of the boys. And I used to even like beat up boys at recess and stuff like that. And it was just like laughed about and encouraged. Like it wasn't like you shouldn't do that. And that's, not good for you ultimately to behave that way as a young lady. I was very sensitive, emotionally sensitive as a child. And I learned so quickly that that wasn't okay. And so I really hid that part of myself and shut it off and just kept everything so tied up inside. And I just started learning like my more feminine qualities were not as desired, it seemed like, to the people around me. Now fast forward to, puberty and those teen years when, your body's changing, your interests are changing, you're starting to get more interested in boys. And you can hear my full testimony on my channel, but in a nutshell, I got kind of sexualized from a very young age. And I remember in those puberty and teen years, it was like things like the boys started getting very sexual, and we started getting bullied. The girls started getting bullied a lot by the boys, and then we started having competition with each other, and it just became very toxic and just like perverted pretty young, like pretty soon when puberty started. And then in high school, my friends and I got really into like partying and hookup culture, and this was so toxic and detrimental to everything, to our souls, to our relationships. And it became like boys versus girls. And like, I remember it started being like a competition of boys versus girls. And we started like, the boys would lie to girls to get them to sleep with them. I would see how the boys would just take advantage of the girls and lie to them, make them think you like them, and then you would be sexually intimate with them, and it wouldn't be what you thought it was. And instead of taking accountability and taking steps to change it, maybe stop going to parties, we kept doing the same thing, but then like blaming the boys. And it again further reinforced like boys versus girls. And at this time, like a spirit of shame like really settled into me, and I just felt so dirty about like the sexual behavior and the sexual sin. And then how it kind of manifested was like blaming boys and like resentment to boys, and just like, oh, we hate guys, like all men are jerks, all men are a-holes, that kind of thing. And you just see now I just see Satan's plan so clearly at that time, like how he just perverts God's beautiful design of sexuality, and how he lures boys and girls into falling into sexual sin from such a young age, and just how he used this to pit boys and girls against each other to pervert God's design for how masculinity and femininity complements each other and just fit so well together in marriage in God's design for marriage. And it's just perverted, like in this sexual culture, it's just perverted completely. Then as a result of this, families and having children and raising children well, having strong, confident, securely attached children that thrive is being affected, is being destroyed because of that. And you see that ripple effect, and you can see it even in today's culture. So when I got into my university years, I started, in university, they really push feminism, like a lot. At least when I was there. I'm sure they do even more now. And I was getting really into like self-help and healing and all the new age stuff. And feminism is so hand in hand with that stuff too. It becomes really focused on yourself and honestly seeing yourself as a victim and not really taking accountability and that kind of thing. It's all about like, you were the victim, it wasn't your fault, and waking up to the patriarchy and how you're a victim in the patriarchy and you're so oppressed and all of these things that you can't do anything about except for be angry, as we see today in modern day feminism. So you start seeing from this lens, okay, I'm a woman, so I'm a victim in this society, okay. And then you start seeing men as the oppressors, as the perpetrators, and specifically white men is how it's always painted, as they are the perpetrators and the oppressors. And in these years, I started learning about, how really just products of a sinful world, like a fallen world of sin, but I was only seeing it from my own brokenness, really. Like I was only seeing the pieces that seemed to explain why I felt so broken. So I was learning about how the media portrays women and objectifies women and sexualizes women. Really just another tactic of Satan to pervert God's design for women and sexuality and femininity. And I also started learning about the prevalence of domestic abuse and that kind of thing in, basically worldwide, which again is just another product of sin, but again, it fed into this belief that men are the perpetrators. They are the enemy, basically, that we need to watch out for and we need to be guarded against and that kind of thing. Oh, it's so sad. And then you start seeing everything from this lens of toxic masculinity. If a man has confidence, he's toxic, or it's toxic masculinity. If a man knows what he wants and voices it, it's toxic masculinity. Oh, he's aggressive. Or if a man says something that you don't like, it's toxic masculinity because it hurt my feelings and I don't like it, so he's toxic. It just confirms like, I'm a victim. And really what it's doing too is affirming like, my sin wasn't my fault. And so it feels like validation, but it's really just keeping you in a cycle of sin. It's keeping you bound in sin, in shame, in your brokenness. And so I had this lens of like, wow, the world is so unfair for women. It sucks to be a woman. Like, it's unsafe and it's unfair to be a woman in this world, in this patriarchal white man's world. And I remember I felt justified in my anger, in my brokenness, in my shame, in my sin, but you feel hopeless and you feel scared. Like I remember feeling really scared when that was my lens that I looked at the world through, not realizing that we live in a fallen, sinful world that is unfair to every single person. Every single one of us experiences the symptoms of this fallen, sinful world that we live in. So, and how this happened. So the first man and woman that God created, Adam and Eve, they were in the garden. Everything was perfect. They had a beautiful relationship. They were like perfectly in their godly design. Adam was a man, Eve was a woman, and they had a perfect, loving relationship, and it was beautiful. They had no shame, no perversion. It was beautiful. And God gave them one rule, basically: you can't eat the fruit from the tree of knowledge of good and evil. and they did it basically. And now a key point that I want to highlight is that Eve was the one who Satan deceived first. And I'm going to come back to this point, but it's very important to remember that Eve was the one who actually, Satan targeted her. She took the fruit and said, okay, I'll try it. Took a bite and then said, here, Adam, like I just had a bite. Here, you can have one too. So it was Satan that deceived Eve first. So that was how Adam and Eve first got separated from God. That was when strife started entering their relationship and just weirdness. That's how sin entered the world. And it was no longer perfect. Their relationship was no longer perfect. They even had a child who murdered their other child. So that, like, we see the effects of sin right away. And, you know, that's a great example too of like toxic masculinity from the sin, was how their one son killed their other son. And so every single one of us inherits this fallen nature, this sin. We are born into this fallen, sinful world. And so all of the brokenness and trauma we see, all of the toxic masculinity, the domestic abuse, the sexual perversion, all of it is a product of that same seed of sin that came in through that original fall of Adam and Eve, that each and every one of us inherits and is carrying around. So I found that in feminism, to deal with this, like, I mean, really, it was like to deal with this sinful world that I was only seeing as the patriarchy and toxic masculinity, was to basically deny your womanhood, deny your femininity, and basically resist God's natural order of how he designed men, how he designed women, and just the beautiful ways that he made us that complement each other so beautifully. In feminism, you just really learn to resist that. So for example, you know, I mean, we see it today with how many women who are feminists, they say that we should be given all the same opportunity as men. They say, you know, I am as smart as men, I am as strong as men, I can do anything a man can do, basically. I think that's the gist of it. Like, I can do anything a man can do. Don't tell me that I can't do it. Don't tell me that you know something I don't know, basically. I remember that's how I felt too. And there was this pressure to resist societal gender norms. So for example, resist, you know, being a stay-at-home mom or a stay-at-home wife. You know, I remember it was like, you don't want to be like a 1950s stay-at-home wife. They were all so oppressed and miserable and unhappy, and they were stuck basically with their husbands who were all abusing them. That was the picture that I had in my mind. And seeing the prevalence of domestic abuse, it's like, you know, it's not that doesn't happen, you know, and it creates fear. You feel scared, and then you start latching on to behaviors and ideas that you think will keep you safe in that. And the truth is, it doesn't keep you safe in that at all. It just disturbs your peace and takes you away from who you were made to be uniquely. And so a big thing that I desired was to, you know, make my own money, not be a man's servant, basically. And this was really encouraged, honestly, in my family. You know, I never grew up with a model of how to serve a husband. My parents were together, they are together, they did a great job raising me in so many ways, but I didn't have that model of really embracing what it means to be a woman and to serve your husband and to like serve from a loving, willing heart, you know. I honor my parents and love them dearly, but that was just one thing that they missed. So in feminism, I found that it really takes away your accountability for your own actions, for your own sins, really. It was like, oh, my past sins weren't my fault. You know, my past sexual experiences weren't my fault. It was because of the patriarchy. And it really takes away your accountability and is the opposite of empowerment, because you have no ability to change. And with feminism too, you don't acknowledge your weaknesses as a woman. You know, as a woman, we are not as strong as men. As a woman, there are things that our brains are not as good at as men are. And when we deny those weaknesses, we also deny our beautiful God-given strengths. Like there's things that as women, on average, in general, we know that men don't know. So we'll get into those too. All of this, like, you just have such a lack of peace. And I remember just feeling confused, and I was trying so hard to know things and I felt a hypervigilance with to know everything. And that's the truth. Because I had so much praise growing up of my intelligence and my book smarts, I just felt like I had to know everything. And so it's crazy to say, but I feel like in some level I felt like I had to know everything and I had to learn everything. And I just really had a lack of peace. And I can really see, you know, with the feminist movement, you know, a lot of the women who are in it, I myself was too, we really lack humility. I really lacked humility in admitting when I was wrong or when I didn't know something. And I would just get stubborn and just try and pick things to argue my point. And I wouldn't listen. I would just try and find a rebuttal. And it was an absolute deception from the enemy. And you just see again the same story playing out, how Eve ate the fruit first and said, "Here, Adam, take a bite." You know, like with these conversations about feminism, you know, I remember I used to have conversations with my husband when we were just dating, and we would argue about these things, and I would, same thing, "Here, take a bite." You know, I would try and convince him of my ideologies that were just so backwards and messed up. So it's that same story again, like Satan deceiving Eve first. Satan really goes after women in this way, and he makes us prideful too. But I want to be careful too, not to say it's just Satan, because we partner with it. We choose to harden our hearts and be prideful and not have the humility to say, maybe I'm wrong, or maybe I just don't know. You know, we dig in our heels and say, no, I'm right. And we just fall deeper into his deception and bring others with us. So as you can imagine, this kind of attitude and perspective that I had, it created a lot of turmoil in my relationship. My now husband, glory to God, all glory to God for that. But my boyfriend was very traditional. He's from a different country, and he always grew up with very traditional gender roles, beautiful God-given gender roles that really honor the different ways that God made men and women that complement each other so beautifully for the thriving of a home and a child. So he would ask me to do things for him and serve him, and I had such a battle in me because I really loved him, and I just saw him as such an honorable man, and I had so much respect for him, and I just wanted to do these things for him. And so I would do them, and then sometimes I would resist and I would fight and say, like, well, why should I do that? And create unnecessary turmoil, really, because I was just so afraid to serve, and I was so afraid to be submissive. I was so afraid to be controlled, and that same image of the 1950s housewife who's controlled and abused, I was so afraid of. So I would resist and create unnecessary conflict in our relationship. And at the same time, I remember I had friends who would say, you know, you really jump through hoops for him, and as if it was a bad thing that I was going out of my way to just do things that he liked just because he liked them. And so I would question myself when I would do those things and all of that kind of thing. But really at the core of it was like, really at the core of it was my fear of being unsafe if I was to serve him and be dependent on him and be vulnerable with him. And two, the shame that I felt from my past that I wasn't willing or ready to acknowledge and own up to and repent for. And I was also deeply afraid that I wouldn't be enough, that if I really surrendered and was vulnerable and served him and just had a real heart to serve, that I wouldn't be able to do it, and I wouldn't be pleasing, and I wouldn't be enough, and that I would be rejected and abandoned. I didn't realize this. I didn't realize that that was what I was so afraid of, but that was really at the root of it, was this fear of rejection and abandonment. And so I would do all of these things, these arguments, and stay so hard-headed to try and mitigate it. And I had such a lack of peace. I see so many of these feminists who just clearly have such a lack of peace. And I can't believe how many women, young, beautiful women, are doing OnlyFans now and doing, how many are selling their bodies? I can believe it because of the fallen world we live in. And I can't say for sure that I would have never, if I was them in this generation, I would have gone down that road. I don't know. I can't say. But there is hope. And I'm getting to that. So in this relationship, God started revealing to me men and women. And my boyfriend, now husband, he really started opening my eyes to it. And I started seeing, we are just different and it's beautiful. And I started seeing the ways that I complimented him, and it made me feel so good that I could help him and I was of value to him. If he had a stressful day and he would come home and just, I was never really raised to cook very well, but I did the best I could, and he really appreciated it. And I was always really interested in listening to him and just being peace for him and just listening to him after a hard day. And I could see his mood come down, and it just made me feel so valuable. And just hearing him say that would bring him peace, it made me feel so good knowing that I brought him peace and that I was serving him well in that way. And from even those early days of our relationship, he would ask me to do all these things for him, and I really loved feeling needed. And I would apply for jobs for him and do his resume, and I loved feeling so needed. And it was just the heart that God gave me to serve as a woman, to be his supporter, his helper, and his encourager, and to be his rest and his peace. It was that heart that God was awakening in me. So we had this experience on psychedelics. Maybe one day I'll share more details, but basically he was getting very attacked by evil spirits, and I knew he was. And by God's grace, we got through it together. And I remember realizing, wow, when I was in the New Age, the language I had for it was wow, the amount of energies that men have to channel on any given day. And I had this realization of the way that God created men to be the hunters and to go out there and be the protectors, to be that line of defense for their families and communities. The amount of spiritual warfare they experience, it just opened my eyes, and I was wow, I have to bring him peace. I can't add to this warfare and this stress. I have to somehow bring him peace. But this was before I gave my life to Christ, so I really wasn't able to fully bring him peace. But God was working on me. God was drawing me in. And then we had kids, and it was everything changed. All of my desires changed. I didn't really care to make my own money. I was well, it'd be nice to make a little bit. But I just wanted to be home with our son. And so I opened my own business to be able to do that and just have flexibility so I could be the one raising our son. And from that moment, we have 2 kids now and 1 on the way, and it's that instinct has just gotten stronger and stronger and stronger, where I'm I need to be home with the kids. As my husband goes out and works, I need to be at home with the kids, taking care of them and nurturing them. And I need to have the home be a peaceful sanctuary for my husband when he comes home from a long day out there battling, really. We don't understand the level of warfare, spiritual warfare, that our men are battling on a daily basis. We do not understand. So women, we have to be their peace. We have to. And furthermore to that point is our men are our line of defense to Satan's attacks. I mean, if you have eyes to see, even if you're not a follower of Jesus, you can see there are evil forces in the world that make people do really evil, wicked stuff. And men are our spiritual line of defense from this. And it goes back again to Adam and Eve in the garden, you know, when Satan tricked Eve first. And that was how sin came through her first. And so we need our men to protect us, because we are, the beautiful way that God made us is like very soft and emotional and relational. We're always looking to bring the peace. Where can I bring peace? And so we're less on guard because we're so focused on the peace and the harmony. Consequence of that is that we can be naive. But that's where we need our men, because they are much more logical and just much more focused on the battle at hand. And that's why they need us, so that when they're done battle, they can come home and relax and let it all go. And so in this journey, in this process, I started realizing, wow, it takes me a lot of effort to try and know everything. And I don't like it. And I realized I would be arguing with my boyfriend. I would be arguing with him about things, and that I was really trying hard to know, to prove that I knew them, but that he just knew. And so I was like, well, maybe I should just stop arguing and just trust him. Like, just trust his leadership. And so I slowly started doing that. And that was actually before Jesus, when I had that revelation. And I give all the glory to God again, even though I didn't know, but that is too much wisdom for me to achieve on my own. It is a gift from God, even before I knew him. And so when I actually met and gave my life to Jesus, so I want to tell you how Jesus fits into the original story of Adam and Eve, right? So sin came in through them. And so all throughout history, human beings have been falling into sin, disobeying God, turning their backs on him, never measuring up. None of us ever measures up to God's standards. And we see this in the world, all the brokenness and wickedness, right? And so each of us tries all these different things to try and fix the sin, fix the brokenness. We try, you know, in my own case, I tried feminism, I tried therapy, I tried New Age, I tried all these things, and none of it was complete. And that's because we can't do anything in our own strength to rid ourselves of this sin, because the penalty of sin is death. There's nothing we can do. After we sin, we are deserving of death. But God did not desire this for us. So God actually sent his son Jesus, who was fully God and fully man. He lived a perfect life. He never sinned, not even once. And he died on the cross, taking the penalty for our sins. And then he resurrected from the dead after 3 days and defeated sin for all of us forever. And so when we hear this and believe this, and we turn from our sin and give our lives to Jesus and follow him, he actually takes the sin from us, frees us from it, and we're actually brought back into that perfect relationship with God. And God sends his spirit to live inside of us and actually empowers us so that we don't sin anymore, that we don't have to argue anymore. You know, when I got saved, it was like, and gave my life to Jesus, it was like, I didn't feel like I needed to know everything anymore. I just felt like, wow, I have the God of the universe protecting me and guiding me. I have his spirit living inside of me now. I don't need to know everything. And I feel much better not trying to know everything. So after I gave my life to Jesus and my heart was completely transformed and I had this peace and I didn't need to know everything, I slowly stopped arguing with my husband. And at first it was like, you know, it's just not worth arguing. It's just not worth it, disrupting the peace in our home. I don't need to be right. And then Jesus started revealing to me, it's not my place to argue with my husband and to question him and question his leadership and where he feels we need to be going. Is not my place, and it is very detrimental for me to be questioning him in that. And yeah, that it doesn't help. I realized that questioning his leadership and his ideas so much and his thoughts and beliefs so much, it was hindering his ability to lead us. And it was taking away his confidence in his ability to lead us and just destroying God's design, really. And just the calling that God has for us and our family, it just takes us away from it, because that's not God's order, and that's how Satan was able to bring sin into the world, was through the woman. And I realized, wow, I've been playing that same role as Eve. I have been acting as Eve, and in my arguing and like trying to prove to him about different things, about silly things. And so, it's not my job to lead my husband, to lead our family. God is the one who will lead him, and he will lead our family. And so if there's something in me that feels like, oh, I don't know if that's right, I'll pray to God and say, God, you teach him. I don't know. I really don't know. Only you know, God. So please teach him. And it has brought so much more peace in our home, has helped him actually walk further on his path to his potential in God, to the calling that he has for him in God, and thus the calling that our family has in God. Because I got out of the way and stopped questioning and thinking that I knew best, because that was a deception. Absolutely, it was a deception. So now in this healing process, in closing now, I'm almost finished here. So God has been really, he's just completely healed my heart and my feelings about being a woman, and my understanding of what it means and how beautiful it is, and my embracing of it. Recognizing the unique value that I hold as a woman, When God created the world, it wasn't finished until he created women. And the Bible actually says that we are the crown of our husbands. We need to act like that. We need to bring peace. And I want to, it's put this desire in me to really be his crown. And, I want him to be proud to have me on his arm. And I want him to feel like a king with me. I want to make him feel like a king when he's at home, when he's on the road. I want him to feel absolutely kingly, because that is who he is. And just the beautiful qualities that God gave us as women to embrace, our emotional vastness is beautiful to be embraced, not to be shunned or shamed or resisted. That's when problems come. We need to embrace it. And our softness and our nurturing ability, our relational understanding. A perfect example is the instincts that we have with children. When our babies and our kids are young, we just know what they need. When people or our husbands, when something's off with them emotionally, we just know, and we just know what to do. And that is a beautiful, unique, valuable gift that God gave us. And I just really have learned to just embrace and love the beauty in that. And just really to love the beauty of being my husband's helper and supporter and his cheerleader and his peace, and just surrendering to that. And I just love it. I just feel so feminine. I just want to dance around in sundresses in the sunshine. It's like my picture of femininity. But along those lines too, I had a difficult time reconciling because I do have a warrior adventure spirit. And so God revealed to me, you're my warrior princess, that I am both. I love adventure. I love to be my husband's partner in this spiritual battle. And I like fighting, I like being challenged physically. That's where my love for athletics comes in too. But also that I love being soft and feminine and the rest, and just the freedom and the being artistic and expressive. And I love both of those things. And God revealed to me that is exactly how I made you. And with that too, God has healed the shame that I used to have from my sexual sin in the past, from falling for the feminist empowerment of sexual freedom. He healed completely the shame that I used to feel of that, and the resentment that I used to have about how I was raised and how I didn't have anyone teaching me really how to be a woman and how to be a nurturer. I used to feel a lot of resentment about that, and he's just completely redeemed that and just revealed, like, he is the God of the impossible. Like, the things that to us seem impossible, like, at 32 years old, how am I going to learn now how to be a traditional wife? It's easy for God. So I just surrender it all to him. And the Bible actually says, apart from him, we can do nothing. So surrendering it to him is the best thing that we can do. Surrendering your life to Jesus, letting him lead you and take the reins in your life is the best thing you can do for the most peace and rest and freedom and joy. In the Bible, Jesus actually says, for all of those who are weary and burdened to come to him, and he will give us rest for our souls. And that has been my greatest experience, and just such a joy about being a woman too, is being able to really steep in the rest that Jesus gives me and to really just embrace being a woman. And he revealed to me too, like, the value in just enjoying beautiful things just because they're beautiful. Like, we can even see feminine qualities that are representative of God. Like, even when you look at a sunset, all the beautiful colors and pinks, and just, it makes you want to cry sometimes. And it just feels so romantic. And that reveals qualities about God. So I am still a work in progress with learning to become a traditional housewife. It's not a day and night. Becoming saved from sin was day and night. Becoming saved from hell was day and night. But becoming a traditional wife has been a process for me. And I used to feel really hopeless. This was very recent, actually. I felt pretty hopeless about, I'll never be able to serve my husband the way I want to, the way he deserves, and to take care of my home and my family and nurture them and create big, beautiful meals for them. I'll never be able to do that. But God, I surrendered that to God too, and he has just he's completely healed that hopelessness. He is my hope, because through him I can do all things. And I've already seen progress, like, there's been a few times when I'll make like a really beautiful meal and I'll think to myself, I can't believe I made this. Like, I never would have thought I could make something like this. And I give all the glory to God for saving me, for healing my heart, for changing my heart, for helping me, strengthening me to learn all of these new things that I was never taught. And I thank him for giving my husband the patience to be able to endure, because I was very hard-hearted and hard-headed. I made things really hard for him, and I thank God so much for reconciling us. I caused a lot of damage between our trust, and it's taken a while for my husband to trust me with his heart in believing in him as the man of the house, as the head and the leader of the house. But he has seen the change in me, and I have verbally renounced to him and repented to him all of the ways I was before, and just have continually been showing, like, I'm trying to prove to him that I am changed now, and letting my actions speak for themselves, and listening when he corrects me or when there's something that displeases him. I don't get all offended and scared that he's going to leave me because of it. I listen and say, okay, I'm going to do better. I'm going to fix it, or I'll do this next time, to actually listen to his correction. In order to lead a family too, for a man to lead a family well, he needs to know that you can take correction and follow his lead. So God has done such an amazing work, and I give all the glory to him. And I'm still not exactly where I want to be in terms of the meals I make and all of that stuff. And but there's been so much progress already because of God, and I know that He's still working in me and there's still more to come. So in closing, if you're a young woman watching this and you are feeling that conviction and you want to become a traditional wife or traditional woman, but you were like me and you were deceived by feminism, I want to tell you that there is hope and you can change. And honestly, the first step is to surrender it to Jesus, because He's the one who will make the change for you. You know, you can't do this change. You can't free yourself, but there is hope, and you can become the woman and the wife and the mother that deep in your heart you desire to be. So I hope this testimony blessed you. I hope it encouraged you. And if you want to check out more of my content, you can feel free to like and subscribe. If you have any comments or questions on this video, feel free to leave a comment below. And if you want to hear my full testimony of how I met Jesus and gave my life to Him after many years of searching for healing as a therapist and a witch, you can check out the video that's linked on the screen at the end of this video. And thank you so much for watching, and be blessed.